Welcome to Adaptation Stories, a video series about the need to adapt to climate change in Antigua and Barbuda, while highlighting the work done by the Department of Environment with the support of the Adaptation Fund and the Global Environment Facility. I'm Mitzi Allen. If you've been following the recently concluded climate change conference in Scotland, or the news in general, you know that the world is in a climate crisis, and it is the most vulnerable communities around the world that are experiencing the worst effects of climate change. The term climate change refers to the long-term changes in weather patterns, and according to Carbon Brief, which is a UK-based institution specializing in the science and policy of climate change, it is estimated that 69% of the climate events are either made stronger or more frequent due to climate change. Right here in Antigua and Barbuda, there are stories of devastating loss and destruction due to these extreme climate events. The Department of Environment, along with its international funding partners, including the Adaptation Fund and the Global Environment Facility, is looking at an integrated approach to building climate resilience in our communities. In this three-part series, we share the stories of adaptation within our communities and the strides being made to improve the quality of our way of life during this global climate crisis. First up, we look at our local ponds, streams, waterways, and their ability to handle extreme rainfall caused by climate change. The expansion of the waterways is an example of ecosystem-based adaptation. Here's the story of the Woods Pond.
The Woods Pond is a major feature. We have looked at the climate science and we have done our modeling. And the models say that we need to increase the capacity of the Woods Pond to be able to handle the runoff from the watershed with all of the built-up environments and the development around it. So we're expanding the Woods Pond, we're deepening and widening it to be able to hold and attenuate, meaning to release systematically the flow of water along the waterway to a 1 in 50-year return period flood. It is intended that once we would have completed the widening and we would have looked at how we can reestablish our ecosystems to deal with pollution such as our water hyacinths and our lilies, the flora and the fauna in the pond, we will then beautify the environment to make it an area for relaxation for the residents to enjoy. So it serves as a social benefit and as well as an environmental benefit to the community around it. It's a beautiful site in the urban setting. The SCCF project, entitled Building Climate Resilience Through Innovative Financing Mechanisms, addresses soft intervention skills such as vulnerability assessment. We analyze the environment within which we're working, the hazards that impact them, what are the policies and strategies that we need to put in place to address the issues that would have picked up. It looks at the capacity of our key government entities to be able to maintain and to carry out interventions, and we also work with our community-based organizations to build their capacity also to address impacts of climate change. This project, this $5 million 4-year project, has 4 components, and the major outputs that we can expect are, for instance, 4 local area plans, an updated climate-proof building code, very critical. We are expecting to give low-interest loans to householders, particularly the first responders, to build resilience of their homes to climate change. We are also doing some hard interventions. We're updating the Woods Pond, that's behind us now. And we are also looking at ecosystem approach to addressing the upgrade of our water system to deal with rainfall events and flooding. And we are also working with communities, schools, and a big output of this project is lessons learned. The Adaptation Fund project, known as an integrated approach to physical adaptation and community resilience in the McKennan's sub-watershed, really it deals with the harder intervention. It scales up the SECF project. So we are looking at building the resilience of the community and the watershed to extreme rainfall events, and simultaneously looking at the built environment to be able to deal with the multiple stressors of climate change, heat, the weather, the drought, etc. We are outfitting our culverts to a 1 in 50 year return period. That means that they can handle more extreme rainfall events, and we are widening the waterway also to be able to take the capacity of the water to its final outfall throughout the different communities of Yorks and McKennans, Lower Fort Road, etc. The project also seeks to give low interest loans, revolving loans, to the community to build resilience to their homes, to be able to address climate change in keeping with our updated building code and the climate data that is involved in the code. Very excited about that. And also the last component really works with community groups and NGOs. We are working with community groups to be able now to sustain the interventions, they live here, and also to ensure that we have purpose-built shelters in the community for those persons who, even given our intervention, will not be able to build resilience to their home at this time.
The biggest challenge really is involving the actual reconstruction works and recognizing the elements which affect the road structure. And of course, we all know that water and traffic are the main elements which affect the road infrastructure. The challenges essentially was to develop a storm drainage system that adequately conveyed the rainfall which is predicted based on climate vulnerability assessments to the main water courses, which ultimately drain them to the sea. We know there were specific areas where flooding occurred on a regular basis, and devising mechanisms and a drainage system to facilitate the flows. Though that essentially was the main challenge. The other, of course, is the actual construction process. Working with over the 3 years that it lasted within the various climate challenges, of course, mainly rainfall. And that is what we were challenged with, essentially. Of course, we did conduct studies with the assistance of the Department of Environment to predict the extreme events as best as we could. And those studies fed into the designs, particularly into the drainage designs, to adequately size the channels and the conduits that cross the roads. When we do have those extreme storms, Category 5, with rainfall, we have to ensure that the cross culverts, for example, are not compromised firstly, and that they are adequately sized to convey the water across the road. One of the interventions which was promoted by the Department of Environment was the resilience aspect after an event. And in that respect, we managed to deal with the issue of the overhead electrical lines. Those were buried. The cables are now buried along Friars Hill Road, so that after an event, the recovery time would be reduced substantially. Also, with respect to the water infrastructure, the water distribution lines were placed on both sides of the road. thereby minimizing the need for actually going into the road pavement for repairs in such events. So those were the two major accomplishments that we had in terms of ensuring the resilience of the road going forward.
We have a working relationship with the Department of Environment. They have allowed us to start to collect data and to impact our designs, our future designs. Because of climate change, the increase and the frequency of rainfall that totally change our shape, our size, and our drainage type in the future. And lastly, it has a great impact on our coastal design, and the runoff is greater. So now we are taking these considerations in our design, and we'll definitely have minimal flooding issues in these floodplain areas. There are basically three that is impacting the ministry as we speak, which is the Woods Pond development. There are a few bridges and culverts we're going to be constructing within the Fort Road areas, and also the Cashew Hill project, meaning that the water basin that runs from Valley Road through the whole of Cashew Hill and into a water basin, we are planning to increase it. We're planning to build it wider so it can take the increase of rain during intense rainfall. It will change people's lives due to minimize flooding in these low-lying areas like Cashew Hill, Fort Road, and etc., and minimize the displacement of people within those areas. And definitely it would change the aesthetic of these areas and the access of the movement of the transit system within those areas. We have redesigned the Woods Pond to accept the climate change and the increase in rainfall that we are getting recently. We have designed it for 150-year flood to mitigate the flood that happens upstream. For this design, we have increased the depth and the width of the pond. We also have put in measures for the overflow of the pond. We have also added a catchment basin that will catch all the bottles, all the debris that comes down from out of the community. We are going to change the drainage design for the water that is coming out of the community. We also are going to build an earthen catchment basin as we speak right here, from any sewage or any other stuff that can damage the wildlife of the pond will not go over into the pond. As you can see now, the work is coming along steadily. We have excavated over 4,000 cubic yards of material to increase the size of the pond. After that, we're going to clean the sides and put grass for better retention of the slope of the pond. We're going to add a few benches. After we finish the pond, we'll definitely add some other wildlife to the pond itself.
Due to climate change, it is predicted that there will be fewer rainfall days in our future, which means droughts are expected to get worse. The Antigua Public Utilities Authority, the only supplier of running water, depends on three sources of water: reverse osmosis, which is water that is produced by the use of a filter to remove salt and other contaminants to provide drinkable water. It is used mainly to purify seawater. Then there's surface water, which is water that exists mainly above the ground in dams and reservoirs such as Potworks Dam, and groundwater, which is mainly below the ground from sources such as springs and wells. With increasing drought, surface water sources are quickly depleting, followed by our groundwater resources. This leaves no other option but to rely on reverse osmosis, the most expensive form of water production.
The authority has made a decision to move towards reliance on reverse osmosis. That is not to say that we will not be utilizing our surface and groundwater resources, but in the interim, we will be primarily depending for our adaptation strategy on reverse osmosis. The authority is also looking to increase its resilience. You might have noticed that we rolled out our new pipeline on this road. We made a switch from PVC, polyvinyl chloride, to high-density polyethylene, which is HDPE. This is a more robust material. It can actually take more shocks. We can operate at higher working pressures, and therefore we can now get more reliable service to our customers at better working pressures. Adaptation strategies can be quite expensive. The move to reverse osmosis itself is very expensive. Compared to groundwater, which is the cheapest source, you're talking about less than 1 cent per gallon. But with reverse osmosis, you're talking about 2 cents and up for 1 gallon of water. This put pressure on us because the present rate that we sell water for is 2 cents per gallon. We also have a thrust towards building better, building more resilient. So our new pumping stations that we're putting down are now being built to take into account adaptation for climate change. So we're moving towards concrete roofs, building them higher out of the floodplain. We're now looking also to mark our flood zones based with assistance from the Department of Environment. We site our reverse osmosis plants on beaches. When you have storms, this is where you have most of the swells coming in, and we have sensitive equipment on the beaches that can be damaged. The water business unit has had to become more innovative, coming up with more resilient intakes, such as high-yield beach wells. We have also looked at micro-tunneling, which means that we would also go under the seabed and to get better quality of water. Because during storm events, the production of reverse osmosis water is seriously affected also, meaning that there's also reduction in capacity because of deteriorating seawater conditions. We have also been looking at a new hydraulic design for our transmission and distribution system to make us more resilient. The hydraulic design would enable us to have better designed pressure zones, getting better working pressures to our customers and in better quantities.
From our generation source, we have to try to move away from the complete dependency on the fossil fuel and embark more so on the renewable sources so that we have a blended mix in our production. We have conducted studies. We have been partnered with World Bank and other agencies such as SIDEMA, where we are conducting study to see how best to intertwine the renewable sources onto the grid and to ensure stability. And we have also embarked on trying to make the system more resilient and robust by embarking on underground distribution. And the underground distribution, though, it's quite costly, but that's the direction in which we're going. Friesel Road is one of the first major projects the electricity business unit is undertook to become more resilient and robust. Coming out of the Friesel substation, we have embarked on a project where all our distribution feeders comes out underground. And how that will benefit us is that in the event of a storm or severe weather condition, the downtime after the storm would be minimal, as opposed to the overhead when we have downpours, etc. With the underground distribution, it's just to pump out manholes to ensure that the cables are not damaged and we're ready to go again. The cost consideration is really significant. So as a result, this is why persons ask, okay, fine, underground is the way to go, so why don't you do that all over? But the cost is sometimes 5, sometimes 7 times as the overhead. So there's cost limitation. And when we're doing these projects, we have to forecast for the future in anticipating what is it. So financial concerns, we try to go to World Bank and other lending agency to collaborate these efforts. But from the bottom line or the baseline of the customer, all they see is that they have reliable power and have power most of the time.
Small island developing states, including those in the Caribbean, are the most vulnerable to climate change. The warming of the oceans has led to more frequent and intense hurricanes. The Adaptation Fund and the Global Environment Facility has provided grant funding that will go towards implementing various projects. In addition, some of this funding will go to the Sustainable Island Resource Framework, or SURF Fund. This funding has allowed the SURF Fund to provide low-interest loans and invest money that will allow Antigua and Barbuda to generate additional funds and reduce the need for reliance on donor funding. In 2017, Antigua and Barbuda was hit by Hurricane Irma. It devastated Barbuda, leaving many people homeless and damaged the infrastructure of our tourism-dependent economy.
What we have seen in Antigua and Barbuda, in actual fact throughout the Caribbean in recent times, is that because of the advent of climate change, you'll find that the oceans get a little warmer, which means that hurricanes get even more severe. We've seen that, for example, Barbuda was hit in 2017 and almost totally wiped out. And we had another hurricane, another Cat 5, and right behind it, Jose. And we had to move everyone off of Barbuda onto Antigua. So it has been definitely a severe challenge for us. We're a small island developing state. We don't have the kind of resources that we can move from one to the other. Our main economy is tourism, which means that when our infrastructure is damaged, i.e. our roads, our telephones, our electric power, when we have these kinds of damages, it means that our bread and butter is affected. Our economy is severely restricted. And we have seen that firsthand. What the government has done to mitigate against it is to try and preposition a number of things. For example, before the hurricane season, we try and ensure that we have adequate water and other supplies on island. So in case we're hit, we will be able to sustain our livelihood going forward for a small amount of time, in which we will need to get our airport reopened, our seaports back in operation, and so on. Because at the end of the day, we are very, very much dependent on imports. We are not self-sustaining in any major way. To that end, of course, the government has made tremendous strides in terms of agriculture, trying to incentivize agriculture so that we can at least reduce the dependence on imports for food.
Minister Fernandez believes that the Adaptation Fund will make a significant difference to the people of Antigua and Barbuda.
Well, the Adaptation Fund has come on board, I think, at a very critical time for us. There's going to be a number of infrastructural improvements, which means that we will have water flowing out a lot easier, whereas before there was a severe backup, which in turn caused flooding in a number of homes. I myself have witnessed in the past homes that have had water in them up to 4 or 5 feet within the house. So this fund is going to enable us to put the kind of infrastructure in place whereby the water will be able to run off much quicker, which will allow for less backup and so less damage to the homes of people living within the community. In addition to that, the fund is allowing for persons to be able to strengthen their actual structures. So, for example, they will be able to put on hurricane shutters. On a national level, the government is committed to reduce fossil fuel emission within a number of years. I know we've already started. For example, I can tell you there's a plan in place, and they've already started, that all government buildings and schools will have solar power. There's also a plan in place, and they've already started working on it, towards wind power. So again, the government is very, very serious about, even if we are not a major polluter, to ensure that we set an example, because we are the ones that are feeling it, and we are the ones that need to show the rest of the world how serious we are about reducing these carbon emissions. So overall, I think it's going to be a boom for the community, and I look forward to it. I welcome it, and I want to thank those who are involved working with us in partnership, and they have my full commitment and the commitment of my community to really work with them to ensure that this becomes a huge success for all of us involved.
And that is where we will leave it for this episode of Adaptation Stories. Join us again for more Adaptation Stories. I'm Mitzi Allen.
The Adaptation Series is a product of the Antigua and Barbuda Department of Environment in collaboration with Hammer Films. It is funded under the Adaptation Fund Project, an integrated approach to physical adaptation and community resilience in Antigua and Barbuda's Northwest McKinnon's watershed, as well as the Global Environment Facility Project, building climate resilience through innovative financing mechanisms for climate change adaptation, also known as the Special Climate Change Fund, or SCCF project. To find out more about this and other projects, please visit the Department of Environment's website at www.environment.gov.ag.